These are in listen-only mode.
Hey everybody, welcome back to our 2012 Summer Poinsettia webinar series from the Ecke Ranch. Today's presenters are Roger Kehoe and myself, Rebecca Simmonsma, and we got a lot of information to cover today. Today's presentation is all aspects of propagation so that we can get you started off on the right foot. As usual with our webinars, you can hear us, but we can't hear you. Use the question and answer toolbar to the right of your screen to ask as many questions as time allows, and I'll address any unanswered questions via email after today's session. All of our webinars are recorded and can be viewed at your convenience at www.ecke.com and on media, which is now our YouTube channel. If you haven't checked it out, there's a lot of our past webinars that we've run, and also just a lot of good library of videos now from the Ecke Ranch. I want to call attention to the rest of the webinar series or topics that we'll be running for this series. Dates may not be final, but these are just the dates that we're looking at right now. The end of July, we'll be doing optimizing branching and things like environmental conditions and pinching techniques that have an impact on branching. In August, we'll be doing heat stress management and heat delay, and that particular webinar will also have Dr. Barrett as a speaker from the University of Florida, and he'll talk with us about the heat delay studies that they've done in both Florida and the University of Kentucky. In September, we'll do all aspects of finishing, and then in October, we're going to do optimizing post-harvest qualities, and that'll cover things like, fertility, chemical applications, all the things that have an impact on how well poinsettias get through the post-harvest environment. So we've got a lot of material to cover today. This is the topics that we'll cover today include greenhouse preparation, receiving and processing cuttings, sticking cuttings, good information about direct sticking, moisture management including misting, fertility, height management, environmental management, disease and insect management, and then we'll wrap it up with common issues in propagation and some good photos that could help you identify what you might be seeing on your cuttings. As always, good propagation starts with quality cuttings, and we strive very hard to send quality cuttings from the Ecke Ranch. These are two pictures of our farms in Guatemala, and this year we added a third farm. And this is a side shot of one of the greenhouses at our third farm in Guatemala. We do offer 3 different cutting sizes in North America, and we have different stock bases for those cutting sizes that are managed differently in terms of cultural practices and growth regulators so that we can deliver a mature cutting that will root well but may have a different stem length and leaf size. This particular stock base here is for our Euro cuttings. This is for our 2-inch standard cuttings, and then this is for our 3-inch direct stick cuttings. We call them direct stick cuttings because it has a longer stem, a little bit larger leaf size that's better suited for direct stick production. I want to give you kind of a sneak peek into our processes at the ranch to deliver quality cuttings. We do go through the stock selection every year at the ranch where we bloom every variety out to guarantee that we get consistency of varietal traits. And then those select stock plants are propagated to build our commercial stock, and that happens every year. As part of our nutritional controls, we do routine foliar analyses and adjust our nutrition based on how those analyses come back. And for pest and disease scouting, we do scout 100% of the farm each week, and then we tailor our pest and disease applications and cultural practices according to how that scouting goes. So it's not just a percentage of the farm that's scouted, it is 100% of the farm each week. Our harvest days are Thursday through Monday to deliver on a Monday through Thursday. We have 450 trained employees that are part of our cutting process. Cuttings are always cut and delivered to the cold room in less than 45 minutes. We do have an inspection process after the cuttings are stuck. 5 to 10% of all cuttings are inspected for quality before they're packaged, so we're looking for things like white flies, disease, etc., and also the quality of the cut by our cutters. And then for shipping and packing, all cuttings are delivered within 3 days from cut, And we do custom packing to accommodate varied conditions in different shipping environments. So we do have somebody that's watching environmental conditions, you know, in North America and all over the world actually where we're shipping, and we do our best to try to tailor our shipping, our packaging processes so that the cutting arrives in the freshest state possible. This is a picture here of a harvester. They're packaging those cuttings in bundles of 100. So we're going to switch gears now that I've given you a sneak peek into our processes and talk about the things that you can do to get your greenhouse ready for propagation. It's important to power wash the greenhouse and disinfect with products containing like quaternary ammonia, such as Green Shield, chlorine, Nacasan, or Fisan. You want to pay special attention to pipes and drains, things like that where algae might be or where plant material has, you know, plant material can be building up. You want to remove any weeds present in the greenhouse, in and around the greenhouse, and I want to talk about this one for a little bit. You want to be careful with herbicide use in and around the greenhouse, even if it's an herbicide that's labeled for greenhouse use. Some chemicals can continue to volatilize even months after the application was made when environmental conditions are right, and poinsettias can be very sensitive to herbicide damage. I probably take a dozen calls each year where a grower is seeing you know, distortion and stunted growth, maybe twisted growth, and it ends up being from an herbicide application that was made months ago in the greenhouse or even around the greenhouse, and it's come in through the vents and fans. So, you know, be careful with, do your best to keep weeds suppressed in the greenhouse, and then any that are removed, sometimes it's better to have crews in there just manually pulling weeds rather than relying on herbicide to take care of them. Liming the floors is something that we recommend to prevent algae growth, which can create problems with fungus gnats. It's an easy, cost-effective way to keep your algae growth down and the fungus gnat populations down. The way that we do it at the ranch is we use a lime slurry where you take 3 50-pound bags of lime to 50 gallons of water. This slurry covers about 1,000 square feet, and you can also add copper sulfate to the slurry for additional algae control. And that's at 1 pound per gallon. You just want to make sure that you have like a sprayer or something that you're using to apply it that's dedicated solely to the lime, because it can, you know, it can kind of create a mess and kind of clog up things. So, but it's, you know, very cost effective, and it works very well for the duration of the season. Preparing for cuttings and planning labor is important. We want to make sure that cuttings are all stuck within 24 hours of receipt. So you want to make sure you have your labor in place and know what what they can stick per hour so that they can all be stuck within 24 hours. A good way to do this is actually track your shipment and know when it arrives. We do have an online program called On Track, which I'll go through in some future slides, where with your Ecke order number or your Ecke or your broker PO number, you can actually track your shipment. Before it's shipped, you can see the what's been confirmed. Once it's shipped, you can see the packing list, and then you can it'll either link to UPS or FedEx, or if it's truck, you'll be able to get updates on where the shipment is. We want to prepare the media properly before sticking. You want to pre-wet Oasis or Ellie pots 1 day prior to stick. We generally don't recommend pre-wetting that media too early because, number one, it can obviously dry out before you stick, but then also, especially with Ellies, you can have more issues with disease and insect concerns if it's stayed too wet for too long. So we do recommend only wetting 1 day prior to stick. And then for direct stick, this is the time when you're also dibbling holes. Processing cuttings upon arrival is a really important part of helping those cuttings regain their turgidity and kind of rebound from the stresses of shipping and stand up faster in propagation. We do want to see you open the boxes right away when they come in and record that temperature. That's a good idea because, you know, if you record the temperature, it's going to give you a good idea if the cuttings were heated up, you know, and just initially what the environment's been like for those cuttings in the shipping environment. And if they're heated up, you can take proactive steps to help those cuttings rebound faster. In an ideal situation, we'd like to see you remove the bags and place them on racks in a cooler that's held at 50 degrees Fahrenheit. You want to keep the relative humidity high in that cooler as well. When it comes to actual sticking, we've already mentioned this, but we don't want you to remove any from the cooler that can be no more than what can be stuck in an hour. And then always plant sensitive varieties and novelties first, and again, stick within 24 hours. And here, We'll talk a little bit more about storing cuttings. Some growers actually plan this as part of their process to store in a cooler because they feel like the cuttings are less stressed when they go to the greenhouse environment and they do stand up better. Again, ideally we like to see them removed from the boxes and placed in trays. Some growers even take them out of the bags and bundles and have like a misting system ready to go. Some growers just open the boxes. It kind of varies a lot. You see a lot of different techniques, but it does help the cuttings regain turgidity, and less initial mist is needing. And we're going to talk a lot later about the repercussions of too much mist in the early stages. This is an example of where too many cuttings were removed from the cooler. Those cuttings are going to sit there for a long time, and they're going to be pretty stressed by the time they get stuck. This is better here, where we've got a small amount ready to go. The labor is going to be able to get those stuck within a short period of time, and they've got somebody always constantly taking cuttings out and getting them ready for their staff to stick. Again, this is Ecke.com and On Time, where you can track your order. If you access you can get an account with a username and password from customer service, where you can look at all of your orders and you can see what's confirmed, or you can just track individual orders with your Ecke order number or your broker PO number. And you can see that when you do that, these are all the things that you're going to see. You'll be able to access information like what was shipped, when it was cut and packed in Guatemala. You can get tracking information. You can see this one here. This particular one is linking to UPS, and so they'll be able to get shipment notifications and updates from UPS. And then another useful thing that you can do is you can have either the order confirmation or the packing list emailed to you, and that's a really good thing when you're receiving multiple boxes and you want to make sure that you stick those light leaf cultivars or those sensitive varieties first. You can have the packing slip emailed to you, and then you know what's in each box. And you can prepare accordingly and stage the boxes accordingly. And just another example here of what that looks like. This is a label from our current label from one of our boxes from the ranch, so just so you know what to expect when your cuttings arrive. This is what they'll look like. They're in bundles of 100, and then there's 10 bags in each box. Bags of 100. And this is the label that will come with your cuttings. Each bag is going to have one label, and it's really important to save that label for a number of reasons. That gives us a way to go back and track actually which cutter took those cuttings and where those cuttings were taken from. So if there's any problems, it gives us a better way to address those issues and to be able to keep you more informed about the life of that cutting. I do want to stress that you should report problems right away to the ranch, even if you're just concerned. Let us know right away, let your broker know right away, let the ranch know right away, and we can all be proactive in addressing those problems. Roger, any comments while I'm looking through questions? Roger, do I have you there?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment. Okay. Yes, you do. I just wanted to comment on the cooler part. We have customers who may do one of a couple things wrong. One is lay the cuttings out in a dry cooler without protecting them, maybe taking them out of the bags, laying them in trays in the cooler. They will desiccate in a cooler. It's cool, but it's still very dry unless you have humidification or mist in the cooler. So if that's the case and it's dry, keep them in the plastic bags, and you'll definitely have better water retention. We pack moist papers in with the cuttings, and that helps hold the moisture in. The other thing, be careful. Don't go below 50 degrees on the cooler temperature. It's not one of those things where 50 degrees is good, 45 is better. 45, they can be damaged, so you want to be in the 50, maybe 55 degree range rather than go below that for chilling injury that can occur at a lower temperature.
Okay, good comments. The only question that I've had come in was regarding printing out this presentation. About 45 minutes before the presentation, I did send a notes page to everyone that was registered at that time. I do realize that I've had people register at the last minute prior to the session. I'll go ahead and review after the webinar and be able to send you the notes page. So unfortunately, you won't have anything to look at in front of you during the session, but I can send it afterwards so you can have for future reference. All right, Roger's going to go ahead and talk with us about sticking now.
Okay. We get a lot of questions on rooting hormone, and in general it will enhance uniformity and decrease the time to root. Dip and Grow is a good product that many growers are using. Common, easy to obtain. 1 part Dip and Grow to 20 parts of water yields about 500 parts per million IBA and 250 NAA. So rapid dip is important, and only the base of the cutting. It's maybe good to have a cup that isn't too deep. When the cuttings are dipped, it's impossible to have it go too far up the stem. If it does, you can get a twisting and distortion of the petioles and leaves, swelling in the stem going pretty far up the stem, and maybe just a poor root out because you've got just too much area active trying to form callus. So some growers then are using a KIBA spray after sticking. 100 parts per million is a good rate, and it can be applied up to 7 days after sticking and still have some effect. And of course you don't want to have the mist running to dilute it and run off the tissue. So tank mix, and it can be mixed with most fungicides. So just another approach. Sticking order is really important. You want to stick the sensitive varieties first. This can include some of the dark leaf varieties that are more sensitive to stress than others, but certainly the light leaf cultivars and the novelties are more sensitive to botrytis and stress. So you want to plant the more sensitive ones in first. If you find some of the cuttings are possibly exposed to higher temperatures in some of the boxes seem warmer than others, you may want to get them cooled down in a cooler and get them in right away as well. Another good strategy would be when you plant pinks and whites, don't put them right next to each other. Put some reds in between. They're hard to tell apart when you go and pull them out of propagation later. Our sticking order sensitivity list starts with visions of grandeur, being more sensitive, down to enduring red and prestige, less sensitive at the bottom of the list. And when you're planting in strips, you want to be sure that you pay close attention to the planting depth. Here, a sticker has placed the cutting in the left photo way too far. They tend not to do as well. They'll throw a couple roots out, but you don't get a good general rooting. The cutting sits down at the bottom of the oasis, so there's a lot of water down the bottom of the media, whether it's an elipod or oasis, and that's just not a good place for the base of the cutting to be. In order to form callus, the cuttings like to have oxygen around the base, and so if you're down in a real wet zone, you won't get that kind of callus formation. So if a leaf petiole is below the media, that leaf will likely yellow and fall, creating disease issues. If tips are covered by leaves, the rooting will be slower for the cuttings that are underneath the leaf, and stick cutting so that all tips are uncovered, and uncover the tips repeatedly through propagation if you see any covering that occurs as the plants take shape and begin to expand leaves. We'll see that in the next photo. Here's a poor job of planting. The tips are covered in several cuttings in the strip there, and those cuttings will root slower, maybe stretch underneath, and be definitely behind the others in development. And the next photo shows a really good job. You can see all the tips. You get less botrytis, less issues. Just a much better job planting here. Week 1, we'd expect to see the stem swelling up. You'll start to get your early callus formation, a lightening of the tissue as callus is forming. By the following week, you can begin to see very quickly some root initials coming out, and certainly, day 7, the callus tissue should completely encompass the base of the cutting. So you can reduce your misting frequencies if the weather permits, and begin to back off the amount of foliar water, forcing the cutting to absorb more water through the roots and adapt to having no mist eventually. More vigorous varieties may begin to stretch, and it's time to apply PGRs. In week 3, the roots are expanding. They should be growing healthy, as you see in the photo. Cutting is still not ready for the stress of the greenhouse, and you don't want to just decide one day to turn the mist off. You've got to keep it humid and back the mist. At this point, you may only be running some in the middle of the day, If it's hot, it's going to depend on your light levels, air movement, humidity, and so forth, but you don't want to just shock the plant by just all of a sudden reducing the mist. So always reduce it gradually. It may take a week to get the reduction down. Depending on the environment, misting can be stopped during the day if it's rainy or cloudy, but for sure you won't need mist at night by week 3. And again, PGRs may be needed on larger cuttings or more vigorous varieties. And here we got fully rooted and ready for transplant. And while you get roots earlier than this, and here's another really nice cutting here in an Ellipot, one of the keys is to get that mist backed off once you get your root system and get the cutting toned. Some growers try to root in just 3 weeks. We really like to see 4 weeks, where the 4th week is where you tone the cutting and prepare it for transplant, because the environment at transplant is completely different than a propagation environment, and just giving them more airspace, light, etc. is a shock, and you need to have that tissue well toned on the top so that you don't burn when you go out into finished containers. In Oasis, nice shot there, and you can see the laterals starting to develop. That's often from a good PGR, growth retardant program, where the laterals are starting to form because you've reduced the apical dominance just through the use of B9 and Cycocel in this case. So after pinch, that plant will come out very nicely. Now we'll talk about direct sticking. It's important to have moist soil. Don't have it bone dry. I know the mist provides a lot of water, but you're sticking a dehydrated cutting into a dry media. It's just asking for problems. So you want to make sure you have moisture, and if you dibble a hole with moisture, you won't have soil particles falling back into the hole that you dibble. You want to stick the cutting and don't water it in. It's really good to have a hole a little bigger than the stem diameter of the cutting and allow the oxygen to get down into the base where the callus is. After you get callus formation, you're ready for root initiation. Then water in with a nutrient solution, and that'll get those roots out and keep the cutting moving along really nicely. So just something really important there for callus formation. You can actually take a cutting and just put it into your prop area, not even planted, and under the right mist and everything. It will callus, it will just never root, but even aerial conditions with lots of oxygen, you'll get callus formation on a poinsettia. Here you see the dibbling taking place, nice little dibble board there. Makes a nice big hole. You just drop the cutting in. The dibbler gives you the right diameter of the hole and helps support proper planting depth as well. And believe it or not, we still see this type of thing where it's just planted too deep, tips covered. That's especially easy to do if you're planting into a light, fluffy mix that isn't watered well enough at the time of stick, because once the soil particles settle, when they are watered in, they'll often bury the cutting as the media tightens in around it. So watch out for this. You'll lose this type of cutting. Certainly won't root properly and grow. And there's a good job of direct stick there. Nice foggy environment. Very humid, very uncomfortable to work in, but that's the way you want it during propagation. Direct sticking timeline at day 0. You'd prepare cuttings for the cuttings, pre-wet the media, dibble the holes, have everything ready. Day 1, you'd grade the cuttings for uniformity. Generally, they are very uniform, and what you can do is just pull out the few that might be a little bit smaller in caliper or stem and put those together in the same container. It's a good way to stick. Maintain temperatures of 78 in the day. You may be higher than that. Likely you will be at this time of year, but 78 is a good target, even on cloudy, rainy days, and 68-degree night temperature is certainly a must. And you'll want to mist twice during the night and do some hand misting of the edges if necessary. Certainly day 1, you don't want the cuttings to dry out at night. Day 2, gradually increase temperatures if the cuttings are turgid, and maintain temperatures 82 degrees day, 72 night. You can let the temperatures get up there a little bit. If you can, keep your temperatures down in the first couple days, because that helps reduce any chance of Erwinia. Also make sure that your tips are uncovered. You're misting 2 or 3 times during the night, and you want a media temperature of 72 degrees for good rooting. Day 3, maintain the aggressive temperatures. That would be warm temperatures or aggressive, and a very high relative humidity. It should just feel like a sauna in propagation at this point. Continue to uncover tips, and you can repair if you lost a few cuttings in there. It's a good time to go ahead and replace them. And day 5, you can apply Marathon Safari Drench for fungus gnat control. Works very good in peat-based media for direct stick. Day 6, continue aggressive temperatures. Uncover tips. Leaf pick, you may see some botrytis. Some of the leaves may have been damaged when they were planted or shipped. By now you may see some growth of botrytis, and if you just reduce the spore load by removing the affected leaf and plant parts, you will have less problem with botrytis, and you can reduce your night mist. Day 7, you can get in with a growth regulator application to help prevent stretch. This is a grower determination based on the variety, its natural vigor, and the size of the cuttings that you receive. Larger cuttings of more vigorous varieties would require a higher rate, and certainly some of the compact varieties may not require any B9 cycocel at all, or possibly only cycocel. Day 8, fertilize overhead and close those dibble holes. Start getting that fertility back into the cuttings. If you use phosphorus in the feed, that's fine up to about 5%, but be sure to rinse that off so that you don't get any tip destruction from phosphorus laying on those tips for any length of time and drying into the tissue. Day 9, maintain aggressive temperatures and humidity. Apply humidity to the floor. You should be backing off your mist, but you still need humidity, so keep the environment humid. Don't ventilate too much. Those aggressive temperatures, again, they're high temperatures, and it's like a sauna. It's uncomfortable, but it's very good. If you want to reduce humidity, nighttime's the time to ventilate a little bit at this point, but keep the humidity high, especially between 11 a.m. and about 3 or 4 p.m. Uncover tips, leaf pick, and discontinue the night mist certainly by day 10. Day 11, maintain aggressive temperatures and continue with the high humidity. You should have really good callus formation by day 12 and even some roots starting to come out. So you want to reduce the mist frequency further. You can hand mist. Most of your misting would be required, again, between that about 10 or 11 a.m. till 3 or 4 p.m. And apply cycocel B9 again if you need to. Fertilize and keep humidity high and wet floors if needed. If you get a heat wave, keep the shade on, keep them cool, put water on them. Water will cool the cuttings. So I know we've just gone through a heat wave recently. We're still in one in the east, and it's a tough time to propagate, but the moisture does cool the plants, keeps the tissue cooler, even though the air temperatures may be somewhat high. On day 17, you can uncover tips and continue with some sanitation leaf pick. And 18, reduce mist further, hand mist the slow areas, and continue to begin the toning process as you work into the last week of propagation. Minimize mist 1 to 2 times per day, and hand mist slow areas. Crack vents for air exchange, maintain temperatures in the mid-80s. Final spacing for fast rooters and carry slow rooters over through the 4 weeks. So you can begin to do some separation of the product and begin moving it with a little bit more space if they're starting to grow and get a little bit crowded. Remove shade 10 to 14 days after spacing and apply fungicide. If there's a way to err on the light piece at this point, and it's July, maybe early August, we can still have heat waves. Depends on where in the country you are. Certainly in the south, they have a lot more shade need than up in the northern latitudes, but don't just expose the plant just because of the calendar. You've got to watch what your weather's doing, and we can certainly get heat waves even into September. So adjust the environment that you have based on the growth and the weather conditions. Any questions?
Yep, we've had some good ones come in. When we're talking, going back to the slide where we showed the image of the sticking depth and talking about removing that leaf that's stuck below the soil surface, or any leaf removal for that matter, do we recommend removing the entire leaf, or is there a technique involved to that, you know, like leaving the petiole behind? I guess would be the question. Is that recommended?
We recommend leaving a piece of the petiole behind, because it rots, it'll generally upsize at the stem and fall off, and you won't get infection of the stem. Once you get any kind of wounding in propagation around the stem, you're just asking for entry of well, any of the soil organisms, certainly Erwinia can still be a factor in freshly wounded tissue.
Okay, got another question here. Kind of going back to, let's address this one first. If this particular customer has a new experience with callus cuttings, they would like to know if you use rooting hormone with callus cuttings.
No, with callus cuttings, you've already had the hormone applied and you have your callus formation, so you should be fine. One important thing, I'm glad that question was asked, would be when you're working with callus cuttings and they arrive, you really want to treat them like an unrooted cutting for a few days until they begin to stand up well. They've been through shipping and it's a tough environment, but you'll be able to very quickly back off the mist, unlike an unrooted cutting. But certainly treat it every bit like an unrooted cutting upon arrival for probably up to 2 or 3 days. You'll see they stand up pretty quickly, and the root initial should be coming out really within about 3 days on a callus cutting, 3 or 4 days.
Okay, another question has come up regarding the benefits of the dibble hole, and wondering if we can kind of clarify why we're recommending not to close that hole until day 8.
By leaving the hole open, you allow more oxygen to the base of the cutting and you'll get better callus formation. If you seal the hole, especially with water, you tend to wash a lot of fine particles in, and that drives the oxygen out of the callus zone, and it's an amazing difference how long it can take. Growers who keep their media saturated after that often find that if they pull the cutting out 10 days later, they won't even have callus on them. So oxygen is really important for callus. So any media selection that a grower makes, whether it's a preformed media or a peat-based, really needs to consider porosity and being able to have enough oxygen in there, understanding that in a summer poinsettia propagation environment, it's very wet, and there's no way around that. You need the water. So unlike some winter propagation efforts in geraniums and petunias and the like, you really need to have porosity addressed. It's one of the reasons we've liked Oasis at Ecke for a number of years, because it, no matter how much you water it, it still maintains a porosity level that's high enough for really good callus formation.
Okay, the remaining questions that have come in are regarding things like fertility and fertilizer in the mist and use of capsule, which is what I'm going to talk about next. So we'll go ahead and keep moving. I'm going to talk first about misting management, and improper misting is definitely the #1 reason for poor rooting, and believe it or not, most times it's too much mist rather than too little mist, though too little mist is always a concern as well. When we have too much mist, it's leaching nutrients, it's also cooling the media and slowing rooting. Too much mist leads to issues with botrytis and can lead to issues with other foliar diseases. And too much misting will slow rooting and result in uneven growth. So misting guidelines, everything we talk about today is obviously just going to be a guideline because misting frequency is going to vary significantly based on light levels and temperatures, humidity, and air movement in the greenhouse. And so in the following slide, I'm going to actually give some sample schedules with frequency and duration of the mist, but again, it's just a sample and it's going to vary depending on your own environment. Ideally, misting frequencies should supply a constant film of moisture to the leaf surface, so you want a nice kind of sheen to that leaf surface. You have to remember that until that cutting forms a callus, it is not able to take up moisture or nutrients from the media. It's all relying on everything that you're supplying on the leaf surface. So that's why misting is important. And then we're also going to talk about relative humidity as being very important. And sometimes I think that's an area of propagation that's often overlooked. Growers think that their misting is supplying adequate moisture, but the areas surrounding that propagation bench can be really dry. And as Roger said, we really want it to feel like a sauna. Your workers are going to be uncomfortable after a few minutes. People should be uncomfortable, but it's really what a poinsettia cutting needs. And then we want to supply little or no water to the rooting medium, and that's really where that relative humidity comes in. Again, this is just a sample schedule, but day 1 through 3 are obviously going to be when your most intensive misting needs are. So a sample would be every 10 minutes for 10 seconds. And then in subsequent days, we'd be able to increase the amount of time between the misting, but still keep it at 10 seconds. Night mist is generally needed during the first 1 to 7 days or until callus formation. And then once we have callus formation, hopefully night mist will be able to stop. And then you can see here when we get down to day 22, hopefully the cuttings are, we're able to keep the cuttings off mist at that point, and we're in more of a like a toning type situation. And this is an example here of what over misting can do and the impact that it has on the quality and the quantity of roots. You can tell that these particular cuttings were propagated where they were, lots of moisture availability and waterlogged media. There's the absence of fine root hairs. The roots are kind of clubby and sparse. And this cutting, the cutting that was subject to the waterlogged media, is not going to branch. Those roots aren't going to establish as well when it's time to transplant. And so the goal really is to have, a nice root system with fine root hairs and, lots of them. Remember to be flexible with your mist. Don't just set that misting schedule and walk away. It's going to vary significantly depending on environment and changing weather patterns. So you really want to be watching what the days are going to do, what the nights are going to be like, so that you can adjust your misting accordingly. Hand misting is often necessary on the edges of benches and then in areas where you have slower rooting, whether it's from stresses in shipping and you've had some leaf loss, or it's a variety that's naturally slower to root. Sometimes you really have to get out there and take the extra time to hand mist some areas that might be drying out too quickly, or hold off on mist in other areas where it's staying too wet. And then there's varietal differences in misting needs as well. Signs that misting is excessive would be that your media is cool. We do recommend, Roger mentioned that we like to see the media held at 72 degrees. Misting is going to cool that media, so if you stick a soil probe in and you see that your media is too cool, it might mean that you need to adjust your misting frequency. A grossly large callus formation is an example where misting is probably excessive. I have taken that call a number of times where growers see a callus that just continues to get bigger and bigger without root initials, and that generally means that the media is too wet and likely too cold. Slow rooting and uneven rooting are also a sign that misting is excessive, and if you're having trouble with botrytis or fungus gnats, backing off on your mist is a good way to control those two pests. Signs that misting are inadequate would be leaf roll or leaf scarring, and then wilting in more than just midday, like in your brightest part of the day and hottest part of the day. Sometimes even when cuttings have been turgid and they're standing up well after shipping, you can see a little bit of flagging. But if it's more than just the middle part of the day, I know this particular picture was taken early morning, and it's obviously a sign that misting is inadequate. Water quality is an important aspect of propagation. Poor water quality will negatively impact the cuttings. Sometimes there's not much that we can do about water quality, but it's a good idea to know what you're facing. So we do recommend water samples prior to the season. And in those water samples, you want to pay close attention to the nutrients that are present so that your nutritional program can be tailored accordingly. And if you're acidifying because of high alkalinity and to neutralize your pH, we never want to see you use phosphoric acid in propagation. Definitely phosphoric acid is not one of the more common acids used to acidify, but we do see it from time to time, and we'll talk about it in the fertility section, why we want you to keep that phosphorus level low. And water quality is going to determine whether wetting agents or surfactants are needed. We did have a question come in about recommending Capsule or AquaGrow or any of the other comparable products on the market. It's not really proven that they're needed. Some growers really feel like it's an extra expense. It increases risk because of interaction with other chemicals. It really does depend on your water quality, and then we have growers that have terrible water quality, and Roger and I were actually talking about this before the session when we used to prop a number of poinsettias in California. We have very hard water and not very good quality, but always did it without Capsule. It just means that you have to be a little bit more careful about your mist management. Wetting agents may help the cuttings regain turgor faster. It is useful if you have large mist droplet sizes because it helps break that droplet down. You want to use them sparingly though, and don't allow the leaves, and don't ever apply to dry leaves. And when I say sparingly, generally when you look at the recommended rates on the label, oftentimes they're much higher than what we know is safe to apply to a poinsettia. So, if you have any further questions about that, I would be happy to address those, but generally we recommend 1 to 2 ounces per 100 gallons, which is significantly lower than a labeled rate. Start low and increase gradually until the water spreads out and is smooth on the leaf. Capsule or not, when you're just wondering, should I use it, should I not? Does the water bead up? It beads up here in this particular picture, but this grower does a good job of managing the mist, even though they do have beads of water on the leaf surface. Are the leaves turgid? If you're getting your cuttings to stand up despite environmental conditions, then it probably means you don't need to use it. Excess surfactant can be a concern, which I'll show in the next picture. There is an extra cost involved, and then you do have to think about the interaction of chemical sprays, other chemical sprays that you're making with the spreader sticker. Some chemicals, they do warn against applying with silicone-based products such as Capsule or AquaGrow. This is an example here, where this particular grower had lots of beading, but could still manage mist accordingly and didn't feel that it was an issue. So this slide here shows where the capsule rate was just too high. It was too high, and you can actually see that some of the chlorophyll is actually missing from some of the cells. You can see even more severe issues where you get marginal burn and things like that. All right, any comments while I'm looking through questions, Roger?
Yeah, I see the words water quality come up quite a bit, and it's interesting because you could probably spend a whole webinar just on that. But water quality varies quite a bit across the country and even within greenhouse ranges. We would generally recommend using a city water, purified water, rather than a lake type of water. There's just a lot of problems sometimes, just the amount that you use in poinsettia propagation in the summer, that if there are impurities, they can just accumulate and create all kinds of havoc in rooting. So you can get disease, you can get hardening of the tissue, from fertilizer contaminants and whatever. So just something to think about is use your purest water when you're propagating poinsettias. And the other is just be really careful about cross-contamination of fertilizer lines with plain water lines, especially where chrysanthemums are often being grown as large crops nearby, and it's easy to have lines cross or some kind of a event happen where the fertilizer ends up in the mist or applied to the poinsettias. And I've seen this just about every year, and somebody gets a crop burned just from that. So watch your water quality and think about that. Very, very important, especially in summer propagation where so much is used.
Okay, we've got a question that's come back in about direct sticking, and it was specifically mentioned in the timeline about spacing on day 21, and probably needs some clarification here because this grower is wondering about wide branch angle, and I'll let Roger talk about it more, but when we say spacing, it's not referencing final spacing like you would in finishing. Any comments there, Roger?
Yeah, that's just a spacing. Sometimes when you do direct stick, you've got cuttings in pretty tight quarters, especially to begin with, and so you might want to end up with a few fingers between the pots and as you finish them out for the 4th week or so in propagation. But this has nothing to do with going out to another environment with them at week 3. We wouldn't recommend that, and it's just to avoid some crowding right in propagation.
We've had a lot of questions come in about capsule and recommendations for the rate again. Again, it's generally we recommend 1 to 2 ounces per 100 gallons for the capsule, but that rate is going to vary depending on your water quality. The harder the water, generally the higher the rate that you need for the capsule to be effective. So again, but 1 to 2 ounces per 100 gallons on the capsule. Let's see, we've had questions about fertility, which we're going to address, and we've had some questions about temperatures, which we're also going to address. And so it looks like we've covered all of them that have come in at this point. So we'll continue on. Roger's going to talk with us about fertility and height management, and then I'll continue to review and see if we need to go back and cover questions.
Okay. Well, there's a lot of leaching that goes on in poinsettia propagation, the amount of water that you use to keep the plants from desiccating and maintain turgidity during the rooting process. So it's important with the leaching to get fertilizer on into the plants, and so we're recommending, at 7 to 10 days, feed them about 150 parts per million nitrogen using a 21-5-20, 18-3-18 basically keeping ammonia and phosphorus on the low side. It is important to put some phosphorus in because you are leaching that out of the tissue as well as nitrogen and the other elements. But 10% tends to be a bit high, and it's hard to rinse it off. It's easy to have damage at 10%. And you might see some more stem stretch than you really need. So generally the 3 or 5% materials are good for phosphorus level. And we've mentioned this before, feeding in mist, it can give you more algae, that's for sure, and that can lead to more fungus gnats. They love that slimy green soil surface. Phosphorus burn and distorted tips, you can see in the photo here. It just locks up some of the micronutrients, and the cuttings may or may not grow out of it. It depends on the levels that you're applying, but it hardens the tissue and it can abort the tip. So you can also lose your lateral development, so that even if you pinch the tip out, you may not have lateral shoots. It's just safer not to try that. That would be because the amount of fertilizer that you apply depends on how much you missed, which has nothing to do with plant need for fertility, really. You can't vary your fertility. Everything in the greenhouse on that mist cycle is going to get the same fertilizer. Some cuttings, whether they need it or not, or light leaf varieties the same as dark leaf varieties. So we would recommend using the French system to get the fertilizer on, then rinsing it off, the leaves with light plain water, and you can target different pots and different varieties that way. And you don't want to adjust feed levels based on how the cuttings look. You may think they're a little yellow and they look hungry, but the colors vary by variety. The color varies by the light levels that both the stock is grown in and that you're propagating in. And it's pretty normal for cuttings to look a little hungry in propagation anyway. It's certainly not putting a poinsettia at its best. But just stay with the program, put the fertilizer on 7 to 9 days, reasonable level of 150 parts per million, and you should be fine. Okay, we'll talk about some height management. The growth retardants for some varieties may or may not be needed. It does help tone the cuttings and can reduce stretch, and that's important, especially as you move into the southern tier latitudes. You can use them in propagation to improve branching because they will sort of suppress the apical dominance, and it makes a nice product that when you go to pinch it, your nodes are nicely stacked and the cuttings aren't too high off the soil when you pinch. So that's especially important for the smaller product sizes of 2, 4, 6-inch pots. If you're direct sticking, maybe you need less growth regulator, and certainly if you're using compact varieties, you may not need it at all. But low light levels and excess misting can encourage stretch, and this can help to offset that. So you get a way to have temperature control but not see the cuttings jump. When cuttings are allowed to stretch, branching may be reduced. PGR's B9 Cycocell tank mix is really good. You can use it B9 12 to 2,500 parts per million. Cycocell can be tank mixed there at 750, 1,500 parts per million. Rates vary by conditions and by variety. Also by the size of the cuttings on arrival. If you're using a Euro cutting versus our standard or 3-inch cutting, certainly you wouldn't need as much on a Euro cutting as you would those larger, more vigorous variety cutting forms. So the pack load type products are generally strong and hard to apply in propagation. It will hold in the media, which may or may not be desirable later, and also you may have trouble getting it into the stem where it's absorbed because the plants are so tightly packed in propagation. For frequency, you want to get in really as soon as you can, 5 to 10 days after sticking once the cuttings are standing up, again depending on how vigorous and how much stretch you see after you stick. If necessary, you can apply a second application about 21 days after stick, and the rates will vary depending on what you see and the vigor of the variety that you're doing and how quickly they root and how quickly they take off. And remember to be careful with B9 and having copper fungicides applied in a time frame near the benign application because you get phytotoxicity when the two are together on the tissue. 2 sprays are good. You don't always need to, but you're better off to get the first one on. So if you have a larger cutting, as you see in the photo, and you think you may need to do the application, don't wait till day 17 or day 20 to put the first application on. You'll get uneven growth if you skip that first one. It's the first application at 7 to 10 days that will give you more of that tabletop effect of uniformity in the propagation bed. And there you can see in the upper photo where you skip the first spray on the right there, and you get the stretch. And then you spray the second spray, and it's too late. By then they've already stretched. That's basically what's happening. And so what you want to do is, if uncertain, about needing to spray, you're better to actually skip that second spray. But the first one will give you uniformity. And here's a nice uniform crop. That, I recall, did receive 2 sprays, and they're right on. Totally level from one end to the other. Any questions?
Yep. We mentioned Paclo products. What about products like Arrest or Sue Magic for propagation?
Well, Sue Magic's like the Paclo. It's terribly powerful, and it's hard to apply it, in a way that gives you control. And what you want is a control, but you don't want it to last forever. It's not like the finished container when you're doing height tracking. So one of the advantages of Cycocel and B9 is it allows the cuttings to grow out of the application, which is a good thing sometimes. You only want to keep them compact sometimes in those early stages, especially when you're growing larger pots. And then the Arrest, I think most growers would find generally pretty expensive to use on poinsettia propagation.
Okay, it looks like we've answered all the questions about fertility and height management. We've had a lot come in about environment, so we're going to go ahead and move on. The first picture that I show here is actually a soil probe. We already talked about the importance of checking the temperature of the media. That's going to give you an indication of where your misting is at if it's too cold. You're also going to get more uniform root development and possibly faster rooting if you keep those soil temperatures warm, so 72 degrees. Just a quick tip here, you can also use those soil probes to check the temperature of the boxes. And this is just a really inexpensive, good tool to have on hand to keep things in check. And infrared thermometers are also common practice. Light levels, a lot of questions about light levels. We've mentioned that the effects of low light can result in slow rooting. We've also talked about too much light resulting in leaf scarring and stress to the cuttings. We like to see it at 1,200 to 1,500 foot candles, ideally. If it's less than 1,000 to 1,200, then stretch and slow rooting is likely. However, on those really hot days, light levels are a way that you can control temperatures in the greenhouse. So, if we're dealing with excessively warm temperatures, reducing light levels, if it's something that you can do, is a good way to help reduce stress to those cuttings. If it's more than 1,500 to 1,600 foot candles, excess mist is generally required to keep the cuttings standing up. And at that point, then we're talking about the effects of excess misting, but you can also see burn and bleaching and scarring. And remember that too much mist to compensate for high light levels increases disease and leaches out nutrients. And so, controlling your light levels is an important way to help minimize the amount of mist that you're going to need as well. And here we've got a picture of a light meter. Hopefully it's a tool that most of you have on hand. I do recommend going out into the greenhouse before you stick cuttings on the brightest part of the day and knowing where your light levels are so that you're not having to worry about adjusting shade levels after the cuttings are already stuck. A couple hours at too high of light levels can be detrimental to a crop. So check light levels before the poinsettias are stuck and then often during the propagation cycle. Just a quick reminder on light management, remember that we need to be shading those southeast and west walls. That's where, with the angle of the sun, your brightest light is going to come in from. Temperature management, we have had several questions come in about temperature management. For best callus formation in the media, between 70 and 75 degrees is when you're going to see the best callus formation and root initials and most uniform rooting. Day temperatures can range from anywhere to 76 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Now that's in an ideal world. I know that a lot of you deal with much warmer temperatures than that during the day. And that's when we start talking about using light, misting frequency, and relative humidity to keep those cuttings stress-free as possible. Nighttime temperatures can range from 70 to 74. We do know that there's some definite benefits to keeping night temperatures cooler in the first 3 days, which helps to alleviate unnecessary stress and requires less misting. So, keep your day temperatures warm, but if you can keep those night temperatures cooler the first 3 days, that's going to help the cuttings stand up faster. And it also helps reduce the incidence of Erwinia. We tend to see more Erwinia problems in an excessively hot greenhouse. The propagation environment's perfect for Erwinia. It's hot, it's wet. That's where, bacterial things are going to be an issue, but if you can help control temperatures, that'll go a long way in reducing the incidence of Erwinia. Temperatures outside the optimal range can slow rooting and reduce uniformity. And then in week 3, once the cuttings are rooted, bottom heat can be discontinued, and you can reduce temperatures by 5 degrees, both day and night, and that's where we're going into that toning type situation. Relative humidity is actually something that I personally think is more important than focusing so much on misting frequency sometimes. I go into greenhouses a lot where you see that they're really trying to get their misting frequency dialed in, but the rest of the greenhouse is very dry. Roger mentioned it too. It should be uncomfortable in the greenhouse. It should feel like a sauna, especially in those first 1 to 7 days. A lot of growers use fog systems, and then depending on the environment, you may not even need to have the mist on like a cool, cloudy day. But I've been in greenhouses where, with the fog going, it's hard to see people, far away in the greenhouse because the air is so saturated. But that's really what the poinsettia is like. And then it takes the stress off having to use mist so much. This is just a good tip here if you're propagating on wire benches. To place plastic over the wire to reduce airflow, which is going to help reduce the amount of mist needed. And then always wetting down those walkways, even in areas, if you're only using a small portion of your prop house, continually wetting down walkways throughout the entire house really help keep that humidity up. You're also going to get the benefits of evaporative cooling. And then think about things like, if it's a week where you're not using the entire propagation house and it's hard to keep the humidity up because of all the excess airflow, hanging plastic in areas to reduce airflow is a good idea. And some growers, and this is definitely more common in Europe, actually place remay over the cuttings if they have a hard time controlling humidity and controlling airflow in the greenhouse. Then you can place remay over the cuttings. It kind of creates even a nicer little microclimate around those cuttings. The picture that you see here is an example of leaf scarring that's the result of low humidity and excess airflow. The cuttings are definitely they're going to be fine, they're going to establish fine, and new foliage will cover that up, but they do come out of the propagation environment looking a little tough and a little ratty just because the environment was too dry. We've had a lot of questions come in about fungus gnats as well, which is probably the #1 pest issue in propagation, so we'll go ahead and talk about that now. Environment plays a critical role in especially disease management. We've already talked about sanitation and how important that is, especially in reducing the incidence of waterborne pathogens, but also your bacterial things like Erwinia. Controlling heat in the first 3 days, as I just mentioned, will help to reduce the incidence of Erwinia. And then proper environment so that misting isn't excessive to reduce botrytis is important. We've mentioned that several times. Environment also plays a role in insect pressure. Media that's excessively wet will promote the presence of fungus gnats, and then we've talked about sanitation and reducing algae in and around the greenhouse is also going to promote fungus gnats. And one thing that I don't have here is the presence of weeds in the greenhouse. Weeds can also harbor things like thrips, whiteflies that are typically not an issue in propagation, but because they don't like it when it's wet the way that fungus gnats do, but it's that can still harbor insect which can carry over into your finishing crop. Fungus gnats, sanitation, that's just the most important thing. Roger said they like that green slime. If you can control algae, that'll go a long way. Moisture management, they do require wet organic media. And then if fungus gnats have been an issue for you, an insecticide rotation is probably a good idea beginning 48 hours after sticking. And you want to apply rotating chemicals, and that's always important for resistance management. And at once weekly intervals if the pressure is high with things like Duragard, Safari, Distance, or Nemesis. Foliar diseases and preventing foliar diseases, including things like leaf picking, which will reduce the incidence of botrytis. I was thinking back to when Roger was talking about direct sticking, how many times in that 21-day timeline that leaf picking appeared. It's a pretty continual process, but in order to keep the incidence of botrytis down, it's an easy step that can be taken and minimize also the amount of chemicals that you have to put on the crop. Avoid excess temperatures for Erwinia, and then weekly fungicide applications are probably a good idea in sound culture for propagation, just because it's warm and it's wet again, and so that that's where those pathogens really thrive. We do recommend things like Decree, Chipco. A lot of growers use Daconil. The only caution I would make there is that it can be phytotoxic if the greenhouse is excessively hot and cuttings are dry. So you don't want to apply that when the cuttings are stressed. Good picture here of botrytis. If those leaves aren't removed, it can definitely spread further to the surrounding cuttings. Good picture here of Erwinia. If you're having trouble distinguishing if it's Erwinia or botrytis that you're dealing with, Erwinia oftentimes has a foul odor to it. So if you smell that desiccated tissue there, if it doesn't have a smell to it, it's likely just an advanced botrytis infection. If it does have a foul odor, it's generally Erwinia. Xanthomonas is something that we haven't talked about a lot in the past, but there have been some isolated cases in Europe and North America in previous seasons, so we wanted to touch base today. It's typically an issue in propagation. It's exaggerated by heat and excess water, and it's also spread by splashing water, so if you have issues with Xanthomonas, it can be tough in propagation. Sanitation prior to the season is incredibly important if you have had the disease, because it can carry over from previous seasons. So if you've had the situation where you had a documented case of Xanthomonas, we can talk further with you about sanitation protocols. This is a picture here of Xanthomonas. Looks an awful lot like leaf scarring. Can be hard to tell, if it's leaf scarring or if it's actually bacterial. I would say if you've got some leaf spotting that appears to be spreading, have that material tested. And next slide here talks about the recommended chemicals for control that include Phyton 27 and also a tank mix with Bacillus subtilis, which would be cease or rhapsody, and Protect DF, which is a carbamate, and that has sort of a synergesic effect when you use it with the Bacillus subtilis or the carbamate. And if you're worried about an infection and you've sent some samples in, might be a good idea to put some copper on while you're waiting for the results. You can use copper or Camelot, which is a copper salt, in the rotation. And then hard part about Xanthomonas is you want to avoid other chemical sprays while you're treating for Xanthomonas. If you're applying fungicides that don't have any activity for Xanthomonas, or you're applying growth regulators or insecticides, that extra leaf wetness can just spread the Xanthomonas further. Any comments while I'm looking through questions, Roger?
Yeah, thinking about how we map our cuttings when we stick them, it's a good idea to put novelties and light green leaf varieties in the darker areas away from stress zones. That could be near doors or bright walkways or someplace where the cutting might be subjected to excessive air movement or poor temperature management or high light levels, because these are better areas to put the tougher dark red dark leaf varieties. They'll take that stress a lot better. So just something to think about as you're mapping out for propagation.
Okay. It doesn't look like we've had any additional questions come in regarding the last topic, so we'll go ahead and let Roger walk us through the next portion. And this is just some really good photos to help you identify common problems in propagation.
Yeah, we got some great shots here. The first one starts out, it's a Peter Star type variety. It's just too bright. The environment's changed. Now this is where maybe the grower's using a lot of mist and had it kind of dark and decided, well, it's time to change. They're rooted now, and just too quickly made the adjustments. And certainly the light leaf varieties and novelties are more susceptible to this kind of damage. So it may look to be nutritional. You may think, well, I need to feed it. But that's not really intraveinal chlorosis. It almost looks like sun scalding and just some desiccation, a weakened tissue that was subjected to a dry, bright environment too quickly. Heat damage in transit. This is kind of classic right here, where the heart of the leaf along the main rib is yellowing and there's chlorosis. And you can often get some pretty severe leaf drop and abscission from this. And it may be that they arrived cool because in the last stages of transit they were fine, but they may have been subjected to heat somewhere along the way. Also, when you receive the cuttings, you need to immediately get them into the cooler, get them out of the sun, get them away from a loading dock, and get them processed very quickly into the right environment. And here you can see heat damage and just the abscissions taking place, some necrosis, and no botrytis yet here. It will require some cleanup to prevent botrytis from taking over, but when it happens this quickly, it's generally from transit damage. And that poor cutting doesn't stand much of a chance. There's no photosynthetic area there at all, and it may callus, but it'll certainly be way off schedule. So that's absolutely what you don't want to see. It looks like it lost about 5 leaves. So that's looks like a nice cutting, but it needs leaves. So I would count that as a loss and get some replacements right away. This was an example of cold damage, which generally we see on the younger tissue and the tips and the recently expanded leaves, like the one in the center of the photo here. So it may look like disease, but it's really burned, damaged tissue, and if disease does enter, it's a secondary problem in this case. And of course, cold damage will show up within 24 to 48 hours after stick for sure. And here's some chemical damage, and chemical damage just causes burn. Usually the exposed leaves of cuttings that have been damaged are the ones that are, where the spray is settled on them and it's just burned the tissue. So you can usually pull up some leaves that are covering other leaves and see no damage, and it's sort of a telltale sign that you've got some kind of a spray application that's caused this damage. Here again, fertilizer in a mist, and then that weakens the tissue. You may strip the cuticle down with fertilizer in a mist, and you can also get chemical damage from the sprays that you apply, botrytis control or fungus gnat control or whatever. So twisting, distortion. Good news here is the younger leaves and tips are coming out of this really nicely right now. So the plant will outgrow it, but it could be fatal. You could lose the tip of the cutting from chemical or fertilizer damage. So you've got to be really careful with poinsettias. Now this is something you see sometimes and you wonder, where did this come from? Where do I have insects chewing? Actually it could be from the cutting process or the packing process or sometime during stick before the cutting the leaf is unfolded. You have physical damage that is fairly microscopic. You don't really notice it or see it, but as the leaf expands, then it becomes a bigger hole as the leaf gets bigger. So plant will outgrow this, and this is generally a problem. And here's a top 5 list. Why propagation goes poorly. It's just too bright. There's just no reason to run more than 12 to 1,500 foot candles, and some varieties may tolerate 2,000 foot candles or 2,500 foot candles, but not if you get a heat wave, not if the weather changes too abruptly. So we'd really recommend going lower on the light level. You get plenty of moles of light during the summer during propagation, and you shouldn't have any problem with poor photosynthesis or other attributes of low light. Too wet is another problem, just running the mist too much for too long. In the first few days, probably not an issue, but after a few days, 2 or 3 days, you should be cutting back and not need as much water as you did when you fresh stuck. And just having too little humidity, and I know it's a problem in the western region, especially with the humidities, the ambient humidities and the elevations can be high, like in Colorado. It's very difficult to maintain humidity, but you have to reduce air exchange, and shade is a big factor in helping you get through propagation in that climate. So you may want to go a little bit on the darker side, and certainly be careful about bringing in that extremely dry outside air, and avoid always environmental changes that are just too fast. Cuttings need to be toned gradually over time. Poinsettias are a succulent cutting, and poor sanitation still is a problem. It's maybe not the top of the 5, but it's certainly something where keeping it clean helps you with fungus gnat and botrytis control. Take those buckets of picked leaves and get them out of the greenhouse. Don't let them sit there and fester and create spore load. Top 5 reasons for slow and uneven rooting. Yeah, it's too cold, it's too wet, too dark. These are all factors that create stresses, and the cuttings begin to react differently based on their maturity and how they sense these stresses. And so then some cuttings get bigger than others, some are smaller. If you apply too much growth regulator, you can slow down rooting. And that's where I've seen growers try to use packlow type materials in poinsettia propagation. They end up with very clubby type root systems that won't expand because they've got too much growth regulator in the plant. So you've got to be careful with that. And then too bright a condition again makes for stress, and stress creates uneven plant response and uneven rooting. And top 5 reasons for uneven growth. You may have to do some grading at plant, hopefully not too much, but at least pull out some of the smaller cuttings and grow them separately. They don't need the same atmosphere and conditions. Improper timing of growth regulator applications, as I explained before. You want to get them on, if you need them early, before stretch occurs. You can't shrink them after they've already stretched. Obviously you need to be timely in those. Uneven temperatures, uneven rooting, not covering tips. These are all aspects that we've covered that can help to create uneven growth. Any questions?
Yep, we've had a question that's come in regarding leaf removal. We are big advocates of leaf removal at the ranch to, as Roger said, reduce spore load and reduce incidence of disease. This particular grower feels that leaf removal might actually be, just getting in there and like damaging the cuttings further, whether it's mechanical, and wonders if it's better to increase your fungicide applications rather than leaf pick, and just wanting to get our opinion there.
Well, that's a good question. There are growers that try to use fungicides to offset any kind of damage. They may not have access in large blocks of plantings to all the cuttings to leaf pick and remove that, but there's always the stress of a chemical application on a young cutting that you have to factor in, and sanitation is the best line of defense and should be the first line of defense, but certainly the fungicides come into play as well. So you just have to be careful when you do the leaf pick. You don't remove the petiole at the stem and tear it. And if your leaf is infected, maybe it's just the tip, you can just tear off the tip where it is affected and leave the rest of the leaf on the plant, and it may well just go ahead and contribute to photosynthesis and rooting and not really impact in disease, rot and so forth later. So you want to maintain your leaf area as much as you can, but in the case of those severe leaf defoliations, I would definitely make it every effort to get in and clean those leaves out and remove that rather than count on fungicide sprays with that much biomass sitting there around the cuttings, blocking air and festering.
Regarding chemical applications, when's the best time to apply? This grower is not sure if they should be applied at night, early morning when the temperatures are reduced. Any comments there?
Well, for the growth regulators, you want to apply when the temperatures are cool, which is going to be very early in the morning or in the evening, and that is also a time when you don't need to run mist, which would dilute the chemical. This would be the same case for any pesticides that you apply as well. So time of day is really important, and as we all know, with B9 and Cycocel, the longer they sit wet on the tissue, the better the absorption rate is and the better efficacy of the spray application. So you don't want to be turning the mist on and washing it off too quickly. So you got to pick either very early in the morning or in the evening for those sprays, and you can shut the mist off for a period of time and not threaten the cuttings with desiccation.
All right, thanks, Roger. We're finished with all the information that we have to present today, and we've also addressed all the questions. I just want to end today's topic by letting you know that you should watch your emails for future invitations for the 2012 series. As I mentioned, the next one is Optimizing Branching in July, and we're going to try something a little bit different with this one, where we're going to structure the webinar around the questions that you answered during the registration process. So be thinking about areas of culture, environment, pinching techniques. where maybe you're seeing less than optimum branching that you might normally see, and then we'll go ahead and try and address those in the session. We do have a lot of resources available from the ranch on board. Of course, you can use that to get the fastest information possible from technical services. And we also have a lot of technical documents. And then, of course, my phone number is listed and my email if you have any further questions. On behalf of the entire staff of the Ecke Ranch, thanks for your time today. Thank you, Roger, for your participation in today's event, and we'll see you next time.